So I'm really pleased to, probably someone who needs no introduction to many of you, Regent Lee came, in fact, originally from Australia to spend a year in an exchange program with us. We were very impressed by him. He fortunately was also impressed by, not us actually, but by Oxford and the university, and stayed on to do some research, did his Doctor of Philosophy with a good friend of mine, Keith Shannon, in the cardiology department, and then has stayed on to really set up and been the drive behind getting this training research program going. And you know, they always say behind every successful man there's a really determined woman. On this occasion, I have to say behind the success of the OxAAA research program, the determined person actually is Regent, who's pushed me to go out and get some of that funding and really driven that program. So I'm really pleased that Regent is here rather than me to give you an update on where we are. And also in that time he's been with me, we've now built the research team to all the other people who are working with us, including Ismail, who's a vascular surgeon from South Africa, who's come to work with us for 3 years. So hopefully you'll get an idea of where we are with the research now.
Thank you. I thought you meant behind every successful man being him. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. As you know, I play many different hats. Sometimes I play a photographer hat. Sometimes I try to be a surgeon. But most of the time I try to be a researcher because, as you have clearly found, there are lots of unanswered questions about aneurysm. And to find these answers is really a lot of fun. Actually, I just want to touch on very quickly about the genetic question. In fact, Mr. Linton mentioned earlier, one of the biggest studies was done in Iceland, and I don't know why it was so, because Iceland has got a very small population. But essentially, what we know, there are lots of genetic predisposition for aortic aneurysms, one of which is on your chromosome 9, section 22. And 40% of Caucasian men carry a mutation on that gene. And if you have that mutation in that gene, you are not just predisposed to aortic aneurysm, you are predisposed at the same time to coronary artery disease, more risk of having heart attacks, and also more risk of having aneurysm in your brain. So as a matter of fact, we know that this aneurysm is not just a disease localized behind this fat belly. It's actually a systemic process. Something is driving the artery to behave differently. And if we just take a step back and look at the clinical picture, I'm very glad that these experts from screening, from surgery, surgeons, anaesthetists, you now should have a pretty good idea of the kind of management pathway from the time when you get detected with a small aneurysm. If you have a large aneurysm, you should have surgery. Small aneurysm below 5.5 centimeter, we keep you under monitoring. And you might be wondering, why do we pick this 5.5 centimeter? The dice has 6 sides, but 5.5 is not on that dice. We chose it for a reason, because yonkers ago, when we look at people who have aneurysms and simply just follow them up without surgery, or if we look retrospectively of people who came with a ruptured aneurysm, we can figure out how big the aneurysm was, and you can work out kind of a risk on what's the chance of it rupturing at certain size. And if the aneurysm is at 5.5 centimeter, the risk of it bursting is about 20% in the next 5 years. But more so, if you look at the aneurysm size broken down into different smaller categories, you see that between 5 and 6 centimeter, the risk of it bursting is between 3 to 15%. So hence lies the magic number, because, as Mr. Sedesso and Mr. Linto had said to you earlier, at around 5.5 centimeter, the risk of surgery, when you have surgery about 10, 15, 20 years ago, the risk of surgery was about 5 to 10%, and therefore it crossed the risk of it bursting on its own without treatment at that kind of threshold. And that's why we chose 5.5 centimeter at a time, 30, 40 years ago, when we decided to set a threshold for recommending surgery. Now, what's different? You've also heard from Mr. Sudeso, surgery is now actually a lot safer, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, one of which is the centralization of vascular surgery service. And you could see from the report of the President of the Vascular Society, the quality assurance outcome data, this is in his first page of the report, very clearly stating, actually, compared to 10 years ago, in-hospital mortality for aneurysm repair is now as low as 1.5% on national average, compared to 8% 10 years ago. So surgery has become a lot safer compared to what it was. And number two, something else has changed. The population has changed. We are now an aging population. We are all growing together, older. And you could see the proportion of patients beyond 65%, or proportion of the population beyond 65% is growing on a very steady pace. And it's not just in the UK, it's throughout the world. And this trend is going to be worldwide. And in addition to that, people are now being diagnosed with an aneurysm at an increasingly older age. And why? Because the very simplistic answer is the epidemic of smoking started in the 40s, 50s, and those people who pick up smoking earlier, they are predisposed to have aneurysm as they grow older. So in the 80s, 90s, when vascular surgery was in its sort of booming period, the first boom, we were treating these men who were heavy smokers when they were younger, and they came to us with aneurysms when they hit 65, 70s. But now people have stopped smoking, and what it means is exactly what you mentioned, a genetic factor that's underpinning the aneurysm development and progression is now manifesting in those people who are otherwise not making themselves, subjecting themselves to the risk of aneurysm by smoking, is because they were intrinsically doomed, per se, to develop aneurysm when they're older. And that's one of the main reasons why the aneurysm is now being picked up in population that's older. So if you put these together, what does that mean? So we also know from having watched thousands of patients with aneurysm, because we follow them through, as you know, 3 monthly, 6 monthly, yearly scan, we could tell just by plotting out individuals' growth chart, or in this case, almost like a stock market chart. Some people's aneurysm grow faster than the others. And of these people who have taken part in the OxAAA study, we now have the data. We know within our cohort the average growth rate of an aneurysm is about 2 millimeter per year. However, within this group of people, we have quite a proportion of them who just never grew, 0 millimeter per year growth rate, compared to the record holder, and I won't name who it is 14 millimeter per year. So you can see there's a big range in terms of how fast the aneurysm grows in an individual. And we also know, even at a small size of 4 centimeters, there's a small risk of the aneurysm bursting. It's about 1% per year. And we used to leave these aneurysms alone because surgery risk still is more than 1%. So it makes no sense to try to fix these people. But by the same token, we know not all large aneurysms burst. In fact, someone in the audience has been monitored, actually I won't name who it is, but someone has been monitored for more than 20 years, starting from the very first trial in Oxford on the value of screening, and he was picked up with a small aneurysm, and 20 years after, his aneurysm still hasn't reached a 5.5 centimeter threshold. And we know from Rachel's data that someone's aneurysm grows to more than 10 centimeter without it bursting. So clearly there's differences between individuals. So you put that together, and this is what OxAAA Study really wants to try to tackle, is of everyone who comes with this small aneurysm, someone grows fast, someone grows slow. And we want to find out why. And this is what we call almost the holy grail of aneurysm aneurysm research. It's a biomarker that can predict the aneurysm growth. And until now, no other Indiana Jones has found it. Okay? So how do we tackle this problem? How do we go about design a study that can help us find the Holy Grail? And for those of you who are part of the study, you know we keep a very close eye on you. Every time you come into hospital for your routine surveillance scan, we try to tag along a set of things, including blood tests, urine tests, additional ultrasound. Some of you had extra MRI scans, and all of you at some stage will have a CT scan, if not more. And all this information are being captured by the study to provide a rich database that we can plow in and start teasing out individual differences. And ultimately, when you come for surgery, at the time of surgical repair, we collect a whole host of tissue samples, including a piece of the aneurysm wall, a little piece of artery from elsewhere that is not aneurysmal. We pick up the thrombus inside the aneurysm, which is the gunky, yucky bit that Mr. Lintott referred to, used to go to the bin, but now we keep it for research analysis. We also collect some other fatty tissue that's around the artery, just to see whether they have any influence on the aneurysm biology. So how about an update for where we are? And this is a map of every participant of the study so far. The dots are growing. About 6 months ago, we had about 60% of these dots, but since now the team is expanding, we've been recruiting more patients. And at this stage, this is what our participants look like in terms of the age. On average, you are 75 years old. There's definitely more male than female in the study, but we do have female volunteers. Most of you have smoked at some stage in your life, but have stopped quite some time ago. And it is also the fact that our study participants have a range of medical problems that you expect to see in an aging population that makes this study very powerful, because it reflects the kind of patients that we're dealing with now. Not 20 years ago when people presented 65, 60 years when they're much younger. And this year, one of the things that we're trying to reach out to every participant and also people who are not part of the study is the OxAAA survey. And I would just like to take this chance to ask, who has not done the survey in this room? Because I suspect most of you have. So a very small proportion. We'll be really grateful if you could help us do a survey at the end of the day to have your input. But why did we decide to do a survey? Because we've been doing this for 2 years now, and we really want to know, and I think we got a hint today as well, is do you people also think they are unanswered questions? And what it is that's important to you, that you would like us to find the answer for. So for those of you who've done the survey, you recognize this question. And this question, we came up with 10 big sort of research topics that we think that's relevant to aneurysm research. We ask you to choose your top 5 favorites. And you must be quite interested to know what other of your peers chose. So here is the running order from the lowest ranked answer. Very few of you chose finding new ways to help people recover sooner from surgery. Second last was finding new ways to improve the patient quality of life after aneurysm surgery, followed by discovering new ways to predict a person is more likely to suffer from complications after surgery, and then discovering the systemic effects of AAA on your health, in addition to the risk of rupture. Because remember we mentioned earlier, aneurysm is not just a disease localized to this artery behind the fat tummy. It has systemic effects elsewhere. So at equal 5 is this inventing new techniques of surgery to treat AAA, or discovering why AAA grows faster in some people than the others. And number 4 is discovering new tests that can predict if an AAA will be fast growing. And that is one of the key questions that I've already proposed to you. Number 3, discovering new medications that can stop an aneurysm from growing further. Number 2, discovering new medications that can make an AAA shrink back to the normal size. And the winner, of course, is everyone, or most of you, thinks discovering why an aneurysm develops in a person. And actually, we do have quite a lot of answer for that already. So on a populational basis, we mentioned genetic factors. We know smoking puts you at risk of developing aneurysm. It happens in older people, not younger people, and is more common in male than females. And if you have high blood pressure, you're more likely to get aneurysm. But that's on a populational level. But how about at a cellular level, inside the tissue, the mechanistically, we also have quite a lot of understanding about already. We know aneurysm starts off from a local inflammatory process. And sometime during that inflammatory pathway, the tissue gets weakened and the cell starts to break down. And therefore, your aneurysm starts to grow. And this kind of physiological mechanistic experiments are usually done on animal models, on mice, on rats, on sheep, on rabbits. In Oxford, we only can work on the mice because of animal license reasons. And in fact, it is one of the things that we have been working on with our collaborators from the outset of the study. And we do have contributed so far to novel insights on the mechanistic reasons of one particular protein that governs the recruitment, the movement of your white cells that actually puts you more at risk of growing aneurysms. And the number 2 and number 3, if you remember, were finding new medications to shrink the aneurysm or stop it from growing further. And in fact, we are generating lots of exciting thoughts on that. We do have quite a few lines of investigation that we want to pursue to specifically address that. But let me just bring you back to this very key question, that tenet, the holy grail of what I think is the vascular surgery aneurysm research, is discovering new biomarkers of AAA progression. Ultimately, what we do here needs to be able to make an impact on our clinical practice. And how is finding this biomarker going to make a difference in how we manage aneurysm in the future? Because our proposition is that if we can pick out this group of patients who are going to grow fast in the future, they may benefit from surgery earlier when they are younger and physiologically more fit. Now, the problem is that's what we think. And all along, we've been wondering, it's no good if we can find a biomarker if our patients wouldn't want to have surgery early. That's why in our survey, we pose you a very similar question. Now, this is Zhuangzi is a very famous Chinese philosopher, and I'm not sure anyone recognizes him. I thought he was Confucius, but he was not. So, for those of you who've done the questionnaire, this will be very familiar to you. And for those of you who haven't, I just ask you to take some time to read it. Essentially, we're now taking into consideration of the change in the risk of surgery. We take into consideration the type of surgery that's available and the likely complication and the long-term outcome follow-up data, that all of which you've heard of so far this morning. We propose the question to you that imagine if you've been diagnosed with a small aneurysm, 4 centimeter, and we now, Indiana Jones here, have found the new test that will tell you that your aneurysm is going to grow faster than usual, and you eventually will going to need surgery in the next 3 to 5 years anyway. Providing that you are now at the moment fit and can have surgery, and bearing in mind, as you grow older, you might have new medical problems that renders you unfit for future surgery. What would you prefer to do? Would you rather have surgery early? Would you rather have surgery late? And here is what you're telling us. Out of 184 responses so far, just under half of you said you will want to have surgery early. Very few of you wants to wait. And the other half said we will follow what surgeon's recommendations. Okay, and we then also ask you, would you be willing to take part in a new trial to see if early surgery in this instance can help you, will be beneficial at making you live longer? And this is what you're telling us. A quarter of you said, definitely, yes, you'll be part of it. Half of you said, I'll see what the surgeon tells me. The other 20%, maybe. So we asked the surgeons the very same question, just to see what they think. So here is the same survey, but we delivered to the surgeon healthcare colleagues at one of the recent conferences. And here you see the photo of Mr. McGee taking his survey, and there was a surgeon who actually broke his leg and still managed to sit down and do the survey for us. And surprisingly, our surgical colleagues also thinks in this situation, we're asking them what do you think the patient will want? The surgeons also think that you would want to have surgery early. No difference to what you're telling us. And very few of the surgeons think that you will want to wait to have surgery in this late in this case. We then asked them, if this was your patient, would you be willing to recommend your patient to a new study to test out the effect of surgery? And yes, 35, almost 40% said they would definitely do it. Just about over 50% say maybe. So if you take the halfway approach in terms of dividing up the maybes, more than half of the surgeons eventually will refer the patients to surgery in this scenario. We then ask you one important question. If we did propose to do this trial, what is most important to you? Because these days, your values, your preferences are very important to us in the decision making. Not just in the clinic, but also in designing the research trial. It's actually quite an equal split. Only a third of you thinks making you live longer is the most important thing. The other 2/3 think that it's about improving your quality of life and also to reduce anxiety about this disease. So here we are in a snapshot. I can proudly report to you that OxAAA Study is progressing very well. And I think we're one step closer to finding that holy grail because we now have quite a few Indiana Jones joining the team. And this survey has really provided us with very novel insights on your views and your preferences, which will be taken into account when we eventually design that clinical trial. And we just want you to know that your opinion is really important to us, and it will help shape the future of our research. And last of it, the logo has changed, as you may notice, over the last year. We now have put OxAAA Study Progress through Partnership, because it really is a partnership between a lot of different entities. Least to mention is a partnership within a team, partnership within other collaborators with the university and the OUH NHS Trust, but more importantly, it's a partnership with you, because together, with your input, I think we're going to be able to make a difference for people in the future. We're going to change clinical practice for future generations to come. And I just want to highlight one person who is hiding at the back on this picture, which is Amy, who is our new research, well, not new now, she's our research coordinator, and who almost single-handedly put this event together for us. Without her, this event would probably have not happened. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope next year, when we do run a similar event, we'll be able to show you the Holy Grail.